Bible, if you would, to where we were at the end of the service tonight, 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. We started in verse 8, but I want to back up to verse 5. Whoa, dude, I love those boots. Full quill brown ostrich. Those look pretty new. What brand are they? Tony Lama. They wouldn't fit me. Because Tony Lamas don't fit me. Mine are Ariats, but man, those are handsome. But I've got some fry boots I was going to wear tonight, but I decided against it. But I've got a lot of cowboy boots too. But I'm from Texas. Come on, my dad was a rodeo cowboy, so it wouldn't be right if I didn't have boots or 10 pair. So, but my dad wore llamas, and he tried to give me boots. I couldn't wear them. But the Bible is full of every, let me say it this way. The Bible is full of instruction, wisdom for every age group.
Yeah. That's good.
The Bible's not just for middle-aged and older adults. It's for you too. It's for children. And it says here in verse 5, likewise you younger, and you can start out reading in verse 1, but it's talking about the elders. But now he's addressing younger. Submit yourselves unto the elder. If you could have this in the AMPC, can you pull that up? Submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another and be clothed with humility, for God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. Look at this. This is why I call this the female version. It's twice as long, at least. You who are younger and of lesser rank. Basically, what does this mean? You're younger in the Lord. You're less mature in the Lord, in the things of God. He said, be subject. Subject means come under. Sub means under. Ject means to move or position. So position under the elders or the ministers and spiritual guides of the church. So this is not just talking about the pastors. This is talking about staff. This is talking about those who are more mature in the Lord. Not a cool thing in the world to do that. Yeah. But I want to show you something. Every one of you is subject to someone or something. Yeah. All the young people out on the streets of Hobbs, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, El Paso. I went to school at University of Houston, 5th largest city in the nation. Huge. I was just in Los Angeles and San Diego 3 weeks ago. Vegas. Big cities. Millions and millions of people. And everyone there is subject to somebody or something. But is it the right somebody? Is it the right something? Usually not. Well, how do you know that? Who do you think you are? You shouldn't judge anybody. Well, I'm not judging in the mentality of condemning. The word judge is not just, it's one English word in the New Testament, but it's many different words in Greek, or the original. How many have ever worked in a grocery store? What did you do?
Well, I wouldn't say it was much of a grocery store, it was more Lowe's.
Lowe's. Okay, same mentality. Okay. You? What did,
I was a sacker or cashier, and then I went to the deli.
sacker, cashier in a deli. What did you do?
Sack and stock.
Sack and what?
And stock.
And stocked. Somebody else lift their hand. What did you do? A courtesy clerk?
Like a sacker.
Oh, okay. Somebody else? Well, I worked in a grocery store. But even before that, one of my early jobs at 14 was I worked at a produce warehouse in Odessa. We supplied produce, vegetables, fruits, etc., to restaurants and supermarkets all over Midland, Odessa, Big Spring. At 15, I got a hardship license so I could drive legally. And at 15, I'm driving the produce truck, delivery truck. Because I started driving at an early age on a ranch and a farm, and I knew how to drive a standard and a truck and a grain truck, et cetera, cattle truck. I didn't know that much about fruit, except I really liked it. But I had to learn very quickly, when those trucks came in every week, they were Jimmy Dean sausage trucks from Plainview, where I now live, that would deliver sausage out to LA. And then on the way back, they didn't want to go deadhead or empty. They would get a contract and they'd go to the LA produce market. Largest produce market in the whole world is in Los Angeles. And it comes out of the Central Valley, the San Joaquin Valley, Sacramento Valley, where they grow all the fruits, all the vegetables, the citrus, everything comes out of that valley. Avocados, all that stuff. We didn't get hardly anything from Mexico then, we do now, but we didn't then. It all came from that valley, and a lot of the citrus came from Florida. Avocados came from California, still do. Come from Mexico too, but. So they would load up those trucks, and there'd be 4 or 5 of them. And they would come all the way down I-10 and come through El Paso, and then at Van Horn, switch over to I-20 and come up to Odessa. They would unload us there, or we would unload them there, and then they drive empty just up to Plainview. And then they do the same thing the next week. So all this stuff, and the refrigerator trucks, all this stuff was loaded into those trucks from the coolers that they brought from the fields. And they were crated in the fields or outside the fields, cleaned, etc., to a certain degree, and then loaded and taken to LA, because those buyers would go to those fields and buy them right out of the field. Go to LA, and then our owner would call and place an order for every week. And it would come to us on a Tuesday or Wednesday. And no matter what we were doing that day, we had to stop everything and unload those trucks and get those trucks on their way. Every Sunday morning, one semi would come from Idaho, and those were potatoes. And they showed up every Sunday morning at 5 or 5:30 a.m. I hit overtime as a 14-year-old on Wednesday afternoon, because it was 7 days a week. I couldn't go to church on Sunday until I unloaded that potato truck. 100-pound tow sack bags, burlap bags of potatoes, bacon potatoes, russets. Then you'd have white potatoes in a 50-pound box, and you'd unload hundreds of those boxes. You'd have different kinds of potatoes, different new potatoes, red potatoes, and different kinds on that truck, and you'd have to unload them. And then we put them in a cooler, and each cooler had different kinds of produce. When it came time to, been in the grocery store and you've seen those 5-pound bags of potatoes? 10-pound bags of potatoes? They don't come that way. Those produce warehouses like that have a big hopper. It's a big, it's hard to tell. It's twice as big around as this TV. Just think double. And it's deep. It's probably four feet deep. And it has a conveyor that comes out and goes down into that hopper, and it automatically pulls those potatoes up that conveyor. And the conveyor is kind of like this. And then you stand on this end, so you got a guy unloading the burlap bags of potatoes into the hopper. You got a guy on this end with a foot pedal, and he's holding one of those plastic bags. And that foot pedal keeps that conveyor coming. And then you've got a third guy. His job is to stand next to that conveyor and judge potatoes. And just like you guys that stocked, that bagged, that maybe clean produce or whatever, supplied produce, stocked produce, you had to judge those cans, you had to judge those bags, you had to judge whatever you stocked, whatever it was. You had to judge it, and you had to deem it worthy of selling it. Can't put a rotten potato in that bag because it will rot all the rest of them. Now, I never wanted to be the guy that culled. They called it culled. You never wanted to be the guy that culled. That meant you had to touch that potato that was oozing. It's nasty. It stinks. It's gooey. It's soft. And sometimes it's just half of it. But I still had to do it. And you couldn't use gloves. It was so nasty. Well, when it came time to our owner, he would stand up at a podium. He would ring a bell, and when the order came in, and he would stand up at a podium, and he had all of his paperwork out there and all of his orders for a restaurant or a supermarket, or 10 that day, because we had 3 trucks. All the rest of us, we would have to go and fetch out of those different coolers what the order was. You say to me, John, I need 3 green grapes, 4 necked, 5 green beans. And you'd have to listen carefully because he's going to give you 10 different things. You couldn't write it down. Going to give you 10 different things because you didn't come out there with a partial pallet. You had to, or two-wheeler, the great big two-wheelers where, the handles were way up here. And you would come and you would have crates stacked over your head to load into the truck. But what you had to do is you had to make sure when you pull those trays of grapes, those trays of nectarines out of there, you had to lift up that green plastic cellophane. They still have it. You had to lift it up, and you had to look at every one of those to make sure that every nectarine and every plum and every tray of green beans was not rotten and not soft. And then there were times they would ask for ripened, like restaurants. They want ripened. That meant you're not going to sell them any green stuff, hard stuff. They want ripened product. Here's my point. You had to judge, not condemn, not to cast aside. You had to discern, examine, interrogate. So when you see in Matthew chapter 6 and 7 where it says, judge not lest ye be judged, every unbeliever knows that verse. It's about the only verse they know. That's talking about condemning, damning. No. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, he that is spiritual judges all things, or examines, interrogates, discerns. That's what all of you did in that supermarket. That's what you did at Lowe's. You can't sell that 10-foot, 14-foot 2x4 that looks like a figure 8. It's like this. You're not going to sell that one. Nobody's going to buy that. You can't leave that up in the rack. Because that ugly one will tell that potential customer, well, that might happen to the rest of that bundle. And see, when it first comes in a bundle, it's all strapped in and locked in. It doesn't always look like that. But as soon as you break those straps, those steel straps on those bundles of lumber, as soon as you break that, and then it gets dried or it starts drying out, because it had so much sap in it or had so much moisture in it, and now it's drying out, it starts curling up and twisting. Well, you can't sell that. So you have to examine that. Now, I worked on both sides of that because I was a home builder for a while. And when we'd order they call it a package, meaning we'd order a framing package or joist passage or different kinds of packages or different kinds of decking package. When they would deliver that out to that job site, out to that home site, before I signed the ticket, because that says approved, I would examine that lumber. Which Lowe's did you work at? Here?
Yeah, here.
Okay, good, because I never ordered anything here. But if it was in Lubbock or Odessa, I'm going to get you. Because simply some of those guys just don't care. They'll throw anything on there just to sell it. And it's stealing is what it is. Because I had to pay for it whether it's good or bad. I can't build a house that's all crooked lumber. So my point is, you can't go through your life without examining, interrogating, and judging the right way. We don't damn, we don't condemn. Why did they call cursing profanity? Because it's profane to tell somebody to go to hell. Because you and I don't have the power to send anybody to hell. It's profane to say that. It's profane to say, God damn it. You don't have the authority to tell God to damn anything. That's why it's called profanity. Profanity. So we don't have the authority to do that. That's to judge in that manner. We don't have that authority. We don't have that authority to damn and condemn people. People still try it. But we do have authority to discern and to judge, to examine, to interrogate, to make choices. And he's telling us here, be subject to the elder, subject to one another. Let's go back to this verse. Come under the ministers and spiritual guides of the church, giving them due respect and yielding to their counsel. Why? Let me just frankly say this to you. I've been where you are. You've never been where I am. I've been your age. I've been in your situations. I've seen all the tricks that the devil has. He has no new temptations. He uses the same ones over and over again. Little different packaging, little different bows on them, but still the same thing. But clothe or apron yourselves, all of you, with humility as the garb of a servant, so that its covering cannot possibly be stripped from you. In other words, put on humility. This is not the first generation that's prideful. All through time, young people think they know more than their parents, more than the leaders. Why? Because more information becomes available. Knowledge is progressive. It keeps growing, keeps coming. So you think you automatically know more. You might know more how to program a phone. You might know more how to program a computer. You might know more about that than me or your parents. But you don't know more about life. You don't know more about the fundamentals. So listen to those. Listen to their counsel. Follow their counsel. There's no new school. There's no old school. There's only one school, and this is it. There's only one school. So follow that counsel. Obey that word. He says, with freedom from pride and arrogance toward one another. So get rid of that pride. What's pride? It's thinking of yourself more highly than you ought to think. It's thinking that you know things that others may not know. And that may be true, but don't think that. Because there's somebody been further down the road than you've ever been up a tree. So learn from that, grow from that. For God sets himself against the proud, the insolent. Insolent meaning non-teachable. Nobody can tell you anything. Nobody can teach you anything. And we all have friends like that. All of you have friends like that. Nobody can tell them anything. They're always the smartest person in the room when they walk in. Don't look around. Many of you can see people's faces right now. Nobody can tell them anything. Nobody can convince them of anything because they think they know everything. And there's no true know-it-all except God. The Bible says God knows all things. He's the only true know-it-all. And it says God resists those that have that pride, the overbearing, the disdainful, the presumptuous, the boastful. And he opposes, frustrates, and defeats them. Well, that's not a side of this equation you want to ever live in. Because God resists the proud. He stands against the proud, those that think they know everything. You know, I know a lot of things. I have a lot of experiences. Grew up in the hood. Worked in the oil fields all around this whole region. Played at Odessa Permian, the Friday Night Lights School. Played at 2 Division I football schools. One in the Missouri Valley Conference, one in the Southwest Conference. Played against a guy named Earl Campbell. Another guy named Joe Montana. I know a lot of things about a lot of things. I know a lot of high-level people. I've met hundreds of entertainers and athletes, politicians. I could name drop. Many of which you wouldn't know, you wouldn't recognize them. And a lot of people don't recognize them because they see them on TV or they see them in a movie and they look different in real life and they're not expecting to see Jodie Foster sitting next to him, and because they don't realize that Jodie Foster's not even 5 feet tall. They don't realize that Sylvester Stallone is only 5'9". They don't realize that Arnold Schwarzenegger is only 5'9". So they're looking for these big humans because the media makes them look that big. But I've met those guys. I've met a lot of people and had conversations with them. All for one reason. Not to tell them everything I know, but to tell them that I appreciate their skills, their gift, their knowledge, and what they've done. I was at the Baltimore airport one time. I was talking to my wife on a landline phone before we had cell phones. We had bag phones then, but I didn't travel with one. I'm talking to my wife on this big long rack of phones in the concourse, just across from my gate. And I'm standing there, I just got her on the line and I'm talking to her, and I kind of leaning against this bar that's up high. And I turn around, and there's Jodie Foster right there. Just right there, right here. I said, honey, excuse me just for a moment. Put the phone down on the counter. I said, hello, Miss Foster. My name's John George. You don't know me, but you're amazing at your craft. You're remarkable. Because she was a child actress, you know, and she's still acting 40 years later, 50 years later. But then I said, I appreciate what you do. But if you don't know Jesus in a personal way, you won't go to heaven. Have a nice day. I said, hey, honey. She said, excuse me, but who was that? I said, it was Jodie Foster. She said, what? You told her that? I said, yeah. And behind her, she's not on a flight. She was scouting for a movie that she was the director of. And behind her was this whole entourage of producers and people, staff. And they were taking pictures of different things. They had a small camera there. They were looking through the lens and just looking through a lens and not a camera just to see how it would look. Well, I never knew which movie it was, and I didn't see that movie until many, many years later, just a few years ago. That was 20, maybe 30 years ago. And it came from the movie Contact, which a lot was filmed in New Mexico at Socorro with the big uplink satellite dishes that are over there. And there's one scene where they're in the Baltimore airport and they show this bank of telephones that I was talking to my wife. And that's the only scene in the whole movie that they were there to find. And I'm going, wow. But I could go on and on and on and on about that, meeting those kinds of people. But why does God let me meet those people? Why does God allow me to even come in contact with them? Because He knows that I will witness to them. He knows I'm not so prideful that I'm not going to commend them for their craft or their skill. Anybody know who Charlie Daniels was? A country and western guy. He played the fiddle and he's real famous. He just died this last year, late. I rode a flight with him, long flight, but he was already saved. But man, we got to talking and preaching to each other, and it was a lot of fun. He wore a great big hat. I mean, huge hat and a brim that went way out here, way out here. You couldn't see his face most of the time. Those kind of people God brings me in contact with. He had me pray for him and his whole band on the plane. One of the most famous African-American actors in American history, Sidney Poitier. I sat next to him as he was flying from Dallas to Chicago, and I was upgraded to first class, and he's sitting right beside me. I said, "Sir, you don't know me, but you're an American treasure. You're a remarkable actor, and from everything I know about you, you're a really honorable man. Thank you for being a good testimony, not just to African Americans, but to the whole nation." He got tears in his eyes. And he started opening up to me, and I was able to pray with him. I didn't know he was going on the Oprah show the next day. And then at the end of the Oprah show, it says, "Guests are here by courtesy of our American Airlines," which we were on. They put him in first class. Oprah didn't pay for my ticket in first class. Paid for Sydney's. But if you don't have humility and understand that there are people that know way more about life than you do, God will never trust you to be able to, he'll never be able to trust you to speak into somebody's life. I could go on and on. I stopped writing them all down because I was running out of paper, and it's frustrating to try to remember them all, but it's a lot, and I still meet a lot. But my point is this: God has done that, not me, not my knowledge, not my ability. When Bobby Knight was the coach at Texas Tech, we rode on so many flights together. We developed a friendship, and he's an ungodly, toilet-mouthed man. And he even said to me, he called me preacher. He said, "Preacher, you're going to get a bad image being seen with me." He said, "Nobody else talks to me because they're afraid of me." I said, "I'm not afraid of you." He said, "I know you're not." I told him right away, second time I met him, I told him, we're not only a plane across the aisle from each other, small plane. We rode the tram at DFW together. He said, "Why do you do what you do, et cetera, et cetera?" I'm able to witness to him. But I started out telling him, "Coach," I said, "I highly respect the principles in which you train those young men. But I highly disagree with the methods you use and the language you use." He's 6'5". He's a great big guy. He's intimidating. He's the guy who threw the chair across the court, it's a famous thing during a ball game because he disagreed with the referees, and he got kicked out of the game, of course. He punched a fan one time at Indiana. That's actually why he lost his job at Indiana, because this kid, and the kid needed to be punched with what he said to him. But he just stands up for right, but the way he does it, is extreme. I don't think a grandmother that comes to watch their grandson play wants to hear their coach call him a effing whatever. But he would do that. So that's what I told him. I just told him straight up, "I really respect your principles." And I said, I talked to him. Because I coached 8 years, I ran principles of your man-to-man defense and your motion offense. He said, "You did?" I said, "Absolutely. I went to some of your coaching clinics." I said, "I had to wash my ears out with soap after I was there." He thought that was funny. But it gave me favor with him, see. He said, "Hey, you need to take me bird hunting up at Hale County where you live. Because I understand y'all have some amazing doves. I said, we do. I gave him my cell number. He never called, but I gave him my cell number. I have his, still have his. But God puts you in places like that when you're not prideful. Now, I'm bold. I'm forthright. I'm unashamed, and I'm not arrogant because I understand what God has for my life. If you will practice those traits and if you'll obey these kinds of scriptures, because this is actually talking to you who are younger. But I did this as a young man. That's why I can talk like this. I submitted to those elder in the Lord, and I still do that. The last 2.5 days, I was at my pastor's meetings in Seminole. He's from Tulsa, but he was speaking in Seminole to submit under his authority. He's 81, and I'm still submitted to him because of his wisdom. Because he's done exactly what I told you earlier. He's been further down the road than I've ever climbed the tree. And I understand he has things I don't have yet. He has knowledge and wisdom and experiences I still don't have. Tonight, they're down in South Texas at a pastor friend of mine's church. And they do that every month somewhere. They travel and do 5 nights in a row at 2 different churches. And they do amazing things and see amazing things. There were at least 150 people healed last night in the prayer line. And they all said, I'm healed, I'm better, I can do what I couldn't do earlier. It all comes from this submission. So we can't be insolent, overbearing, disdainful, presumptuous, and boastful. And he opposes and frustrates and defeats those who are prideful, but he gives grace, favor, blessing to the humble. He gives you grace, empowerment, wisdom, favor. Look at verse 6. Therefore, humble yourselves. Demote, lower yourselves in your own estimation. That's the best definition of humility in the Bible, right here. Lower yourselves in your own estimation. What's the language of your generation? I'll tell you, it's sarcasm. Talking smack. Sarcasm is false. It's not true. It's not fact. And it will mess you up because your spirit, death and life are in the power of the tongue, the Bible says, your spirit wants something to hang its hat on. Truth. If you're always talking smack, sarcasm is a form of lying. It's not truthful. That's a form of lying. It will mess you up. It will mess up your spirit. It will set you back years, if not decades, or the rest of your life. So he says, lower yourselves in your own estimation under the mighty hand of God, that in due time he may exalt you. He may exalt you. Here's the problem with sarcasm. You're trying to lift up your knowledge and your ability over somebody else. You're trying to tear them down so you'll be lifted up. That's what pride does. Next verse. So cast the whole of your care, all your anxieties, your worries, all your concerns, once and for all, on him, for he cares for you affectionately and cares about you watchfully. Now, at the beginning of that, it says, cast the whole of your care, all your anxieties and worries, concerns, once and for all. How do you cast something over on God? With your mouth. With your heart and your mouth. Lord, I give this to you. I still do this. I'm not young anymore, but I still do this. We need to cast it over on God. God, I give you this problem. I give you this worry. I give you this fretting. I give you this anxiety. I can't take it. I can't do it. If you look at some of the Greek in this, the reason this is linked where it is because it's referring to the fact we think we can carry those things. We think we can handle it. That's pride.
That's good.
That's why it's connected to the previous verses. It's actually pride to think that we can do all this, that we're smart enough, we're experienced enough, we're cool enough to overcome this and overcome that. And hey, I get it. I used to be just like you. I used to think I was invincible too. Nothing can hurt me. I'm from the hood. I can bench press 420. I can run a 4.45 40. I'm all state in Texas. And if you get lifted up in your pride, you think you're invincible, you can do anything. And you'll find out very quickly the enemy will pull the rug out from under you and your world will come crashing down. But the Lord will always be there to pick you up if you'll trust him.
That's good.
If you'll trust him. You bench press 420? Yeah. That's nothing compared to the guys I played with. I played with a guy that ended up on the 49ers with Joe Montana, won 4 Super Bowl rings, that bench pressed 600 pounds. And he ran a 4.8 40. That's slow, but he weighed 295. That's motoring for almost a 300-pound guy. My brother, who's just 4 years older than me, 2 years ago bench pressed 550 when he was 62. 550. That hurts to think about that at my age. My goodness. I hope you strapped up all your stuff, man, when you were doing that. You didn't hurt yourself. But my point is, no matter what you've ever done, there's somebody that's done it better and done it more and done it higher than you have. So get off your high horse.
Yeah.
All right, one more verse. Be well balanced. Temperate, sober of mind, be vigilant, cautious at all times. We looked at this during the service tonight. The enemy of yours, the devil, roams about as a roaring lion, seeking someone to seize upon and devour. This is our last verse, and you could look at the rest of that later, but what's he saying? If you're not humble, if you're lifted up in pride, if you're lifted up in anxieties and fears and cares, there's a devil out there roaming around looking for people who are not paying attention.
Yeah.
Looking for people who don't know who they are in Christ. Instead of having your identity in stuff, in someone else, in your schooling, in your job, in your work, in your hair, your makeup. We'll get to the women in a second. But your identity is all this natural stuff. None of that stuff has any power over the enemy, over the roaring lion. But when your identity is in him, woo, you'll see over the weeds. You'll see the truth when everybody else is lost in the weeds. Do you think people get drunk and do drugs because they're fulfilled? You think girls give away their bodies? You think guys go after girls, loose girls, because they're fulfilled? It's because they don't know who they are. They don't know the value that they have in Christ. I said this in the earlier service. Make your yes greater than your no. In other words, you pursue the truth, you pursue the right things. You chase after God. You seek ye first the kingdom. He'll add all that other stuff that adds flavor to life, that adds value to life. He'll add all that.
Yeah.
He'll do it. Amen.